All right, my friends, let's play with the macro model. You got the three equation system, ISP, MP, and the PC. The shock I put before you was increase. Hopefully you can see in the epsilon PC. Sorry for the poor lighting. Uh, PC, Phillips curve, epsilon, something extra, exogenous shock. Not about inflation expectations and not about output, that output gap specifically. So first thing is to put some context to this. What could that be? Maybe think of like a hurricane, a flood, natural disaster. Something hits, and all of a sudden there's people scrambling for plywood to barricade the windows or water, something like this. That's all in the epsilon. Okay, so then what's going to happen to the rest of the system? Well, one thing I want to remind you of is the cycle of activity that we've been displaying on most of our slides. It has looked like that. Now, at this stage of our training, come on, I'm out of focus. There we go. At this stage of our training, we haven't done the labor market yet because we only have a three equation system. So, in fact, we have an easier setup. The arrows are important. The cycle of activity is important. Figure out where the shock starts. Boom. And then everything flows through accordingly. What's the connection between pi and r? Pi and r, MP. What's the connection between r and y? Is. And what's the connection between y and pi? PC, right? You go ahead and you can make those connections. So what's your instinct in this? If we have pi and then r and then y, you could start telling a story. And this is where, for our homework assignment, the next question about the graph and then the intuition kind of get molded together. We know the shock is going to cause inflation to go up. Well, then how's the connection to R? Monetary policy, if inflation goes up, we're going to see an increase. That should be a plus. An increase in the real interest rate to deal with, to quell, to bring them back to their target. And then as interest rates rise, we're going to see a decline in economic activity for anybody that needs to borrow to facilitate the purchase of a new car, a new home, whatever it might be. Well, that's both under C and then under I, all of which are under that IS curve. Okay, so we got what the shock could be. We got some intuition and story about it. Visualization, there's a few ways you could do that. Got your three equations, three endogenous, three graphs. Speed it up so you don't get bored. Those are R's. Monetary policy, IS curve. And we can start thinking about the initial. Now, these two should line up. That R and that pi don't necessarily need to line up. In the black, that would be the first. Now you got some type of shock. We know it's a supply shock because we're building the aggregate supply curve from the Phillips curve, and pi is on the vertical, y is on the horizontal. Everything else, epsilon, pardon me, the expectation of pi, y star, and the epsilon PC, those are all other than what's on the axes, which means they're part of the intercept, which means we shift. And if that intercept is shifting up, boom, you get that kick. So what you can think about is what happens. Well, I'll keep that in red. I'll keep that in red. The net result is an increase in inflation, a decrease in output. And if inflation goes up, well, I got to go up on that way to make it consistent. How do I get that? Well, that's an increase in that interest rate. I got to make that consistent with the increase in the interest rate. That would suggest lower output, which is exactly what I saw there. Our graph fits the puzzle. Now, that gets you, basically all the way there. You could start thinking about points of disequilibria as well. I won't show it right now, but what you could think about is what happens right when there's a hit up and then how the system re-equilibrates. But with that story, you're good to go. Hope that helps.